Stand by for a brand new Live from My Office. Unless you've heard it before and it was so good, you're coming back for the rerun. It's going to be a busy spring at the Rouse Center for the Performing Arts in Crystal Lake. It's just a great venue for entertainment anytime. Let me give you just a few highlights of upcoming events at the Row. The Wizard of Oz being put on by one of the middle schools in the area, the Encore Music Academy Youth Orchestra, and a member appreciation and discount night with great prices on tickets, the best of the year. That's coming up on May 11th, and you still have time to be a member. All the information at rausecenter.org, RAUE Center.org. As you get a little bit later into the spring, Thursday, May 18th, a Blues Weekend kickoff, and it's going to be a fabulous weekend with blues superstars. You can get a Blues Weekend VIP pass, and the extended hours of the box office on Members Night will help, but if you're not a member, you can still jump in. There's a masterclass series with the great Ernie Watts, two-time Grammy-winning saxophonist, and there's also Corky Siegel and Ernie Watts getting together for Blues Weekend. Corky's one of the world's great blues harmonica players, bar none, and Derek Procell will be in the Burbs for the weekend. And his latest album, Hello Mojo, #1 soul blues album for 7 weeks. All those tickets, too, available at the Rouse Center at rausecenter.org. Lucy's Comedy Club is on, the Green Room Improv this spring. And, of course, once you get closer to Father's Day, the Forefathers are back. We'll do another one of our world-famous shows. Tim Benker, John DeCoste, Mike Toomey, and me. Very reasonably priced tickets. It's a shame how cheap these are. On Friday, June 16th, stand-up comedy with your friends Banker, DeCoste, Toomey, and me, Steve Cochran. Join us at the Rouse Center, a great place for entertainment all year long, and a great spring ahead. rausecenter.org. That's rausecenter.org. You can also go by the box office in town or call the Rouse Center anytime at 815-356-9212. Row, R-A-U-E, center.org. Welcome to Live from My Office, where today we get part 2 of So a Priest and a Rabbi Walk Into a Podcast. Rabbi Evan Moffic and Father Tom Hurley will join me again. We continue to talk about the crisis in faith story, but also where you go from Passover and Easter in 2023, and what do we do about the faith that we all, in my opinion, need. You know what I like to say? I don't care who your God is, get a little closer to him or her and try to be a better person tomorrow than you were today. That's Father Tom and Evan Moffic in just a moment. Before we get to that, I want to remind you the radio show's on every morning on the Big 890 WLS. That's 890 WLS Radio in Chicago. Hey, kids, I don't know if you know this, but podcasts like this one, they're really just a long-form version of radio with no traffic and sports and news in there, unless that's the guest you're interviewing. Yeah. 100 years of radio. We just passed 99 of them on WLS, and no matter how old you think I am, I've only been there for 9 of those months, or 10, whatever it is now. But I'm glad you're here wherever you're listening around the Midwest, around America, and around the world. Last I looked, 15 different countries listening to Live from My Office. I hope you enjoy this conversation. I really think it's important. And, to get an opportunity to talk about something important on Live from My Office, well, that doesn't happen every day. So stand by now as I give you a priest and a rabbi walk into a podcast. And we'll even talk about what it's like to get married outside of your own faith, because it's that season too. That's now on Live from My Office. All right, once again, it's a priest and a rabbi walk into a podcast. This is part 2. I'd like to welcome Rabbi Evan Moffic. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Nice to be with you again, Steve.
And I appreciate you doing this. Father Tom Murphy, how are you?
Tom Murphy, you changed my last name. Hurley is the last name, but,
Well, I wanted to give you, Tom Hurley, I did spend 5 hours with you on a golf course. I wanted to give you all the Irish names.
I think you're trying to
Father Tom O'Donnell, too.
Yes. O'Donnell, O'Connell, Murphy, Hurley. Father
Hurley
Tom
was-
Hurley, how are you?
I am well. I'm well. Thank you for having me back on here.
The last time we did this, we dove in pretty hard to a crisis in faith, and it doesn't have to all be doom and gloom, and it wasn't the last time we talked either. But there's some very serious topics to discuss, and we're recording this actually on April 13th, in the midst of Passover and Easter season. So, Rabbi, if we could start with Passover, I hope it has been a happy Passover.
Yeah, it's been a great Passover, and it's been nice having some beautiful, Passover is a spring holiday, and to have some spring weather here in Chicago has made it extra special. But yeah, it's been a wonderful one. Had some good family time, good food, and I'm glad not to have to, matzah is it's not my preferred bread of choice, but it's fun to eat. It's fun to eat once a year, a couple times a year. So it was lovely.
You were a child, and matzah was a part of things. How did your parents explain it to you?
I think they said it was, we had to rush out of the land of Egypt. With we had a window of opportunity to escape, and then Pharaoh changed his mind. So we had to move fast, and there wasn't time for the bread to rise, kind of the classic story.
Sure.
So we ate the unleavened, unrisen bread, the crunchy matzah, and that's what we do on Passover. And my mom, there's something called matzah brie, which is kind of like it's like eggs and butter and matzah kind of made into a mix. It's almost like a hash. It's a
Sure.
matzah hash, and my mom would make great matzah hash, so I always looked forward to that. And then you can also make matzah meal pancakes. So I guess, they gave me the theological explanation, but then, it ultimately all becomes about the food. And that's what
it's
happened.
interesting. It's interesting because you are a prolific author, and we talked about it outside of the interview last time, in the opening and the close to the podcast. How many books now?
7.
7 books, and not a single, Father Tom Hurley, not a single book with matzah hash recipes. Can't you? It's a shock to me.
I should have one. I should. Yeah, it'd have to come from my mom. I should do a book with her. She would love that.
Father Tom Hurley, I hope the Easter season has treated you well.
It has. It's been delightful. And again, along with Evan, Easter too, just like Passover. I mean, it's where it originated, a beautiful spring celebration. And it just seems like it was even more special this year with weather that was not very characteristic for, April here in Chicago. I guess it's always kind of iffy, but anyhow, the weather turned out great. I'm hearing from people that numbers were pretty solid and up a little bit in terms of churches. I hope that's true. I hope this was a new beginning. Easter's about new beginnings, so I hope that it was a new beginning and a renewal for a lot of people.
So let's talk about what you both do now, just to remind folks. Father Tom, you were at Old St. Pat's for a very long time. And after leaving, where do we find you now most days?
So most days you find me here at my alma mater of Marist High School out on the southwest side of the city. It's a co-ed Catholic school, originated in the Marist Brothers tradition. And I'm here as kind of the chaplain and pastor, if you will, and do some campus ministry as well as do what pastors do. And unfortunately, one of those tasks is raising money to make sure that the mission stays strong. So I've been entrusted with that responsibility.
And Rabbi Evan Moffic, tell me about yours.
I am out in Highland Park at a synagogue, Macomb Solel, Lakeside. And I've been the rabbi here for almost 15 years now. And I do a lot of the same stuff that Tom does. A lot of ministry of working with people of all ages, and fundraising too. That's a part of any modern minister's job. It's a blessing to be here.
It's interesting you bring that up, because that is one of the things that is an ultimate truth of church. and an ultimate responsibility for a pastor, for a rabbi as well, is to find a way to fund the business,
Yeah.
to be able to support the staff that you need and to keep folks there, and get obviously a large group of volunteers, but you also have a large paid staff as well. And if attendance is down, that becomes a tougher putt. So, Father Tom, you talked about attendance being up again. Maybe we should revisit that and talk about why it's important to be in church, because folks certainly show up at Easter and Christmas as Christians. Folks show up on the high holidays for Judaism. But in a Catholic church, there's a lot of talk, a lot of publicity, a lot of press about how attendance has been down. So while online and technology makes everything more accessible, why is it important to be in person?
Well, I think I don't think it's just unique to Catholicism, but as we talked about last time we were together, I mean, Evan and I and his wife Ari, we've had these conversations, frequently in terms of the challenge of organized religion, and that we're all kind of experiencing, I wouldn't say a decline, but I think we're experiencing some challenges. And when you talk about the importance, again, from my experience as a kid growing up, and I think one of the important influences of becoming a priest was just the importance of the community. And, I shared the experience of, the sisters and the priests were very, very important to me and to my family, especially at the most critical moment. And, there's something about, at least in our tradition, we talk about the incarnation, God becoming one of us in Jesus. And so incarnation means we need to be in the flesh. And, when it comes to caring for families who are suffering or people who are in need, I'm sorry, but that's just stuff you can't it just doesn't work over the Zoom. During the pandemic, I was just talking to a guy the other day who, did the 12-step, and, they made do during the 12-step and, going to meetings, recovery meetings, using Zoom during COVID. But he said that was his expression. We made do. And I think we made do with doing virtual masses, virtual 12-step gatherings, virtual Shabbat services, perhaps. But I mean, when it comes down to it, there's something about being in the flesh with one another, body to body, soul to soul, that I think is really, really important. And numbers speak, I think the more the merrier, to use an old expression. And I do believe that's an important part of who we are in all of our traditions.
And Rabbi, is it a similar, I guess I don't want to say threat, but it's certainly a concern. It's a concern I have as a rapidly aging Christian, that the lack of gathering of people of faith, there's something that really goes away, as Father Tom was just discussing. Did Jews share that concern?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely share that concern. I'd say slightly different sort of emphasis, though. I think in Catholicism and probably in, Protestantism too, there's a huge emphasis on people attending worship, that the worship people be together. And that's tremendous in Judaism too. But Passover primarily takes place in the home, that it's in people's homes where you have this Passover meal. And that, interestingly, is also declining. Again, I'm talking about my mom again. We were talking and she was telling me that she knows a lot of people who just aren't going to Passover Seders. They're not going to Passover meals. And that was even the most secular Jew 20, 30 years ago would still go to a Passover Seder. It might not be a very religious Seder. You might just say one or two prayers and then eat, but at least it was some sort of special meal. Now there are many people who just don't even go, don't mark it in any way. So I think that is certainly a trend. I will say, I'm a glass half full kind of guy. The one really good thing about sort of Zoom and virtual gatherings I have noticed is, we have a substantial elderly population in the synagogue, people who are in their 80s and 90s. They may live in assisted living. And then there are others who they might travel a lot. You know, they're going to see their grandchildren here and this and that. And the fact that we do have more online gatherings now actually enables them to participate more. So the person who's, 90, 92 can come to a Torah study class or attend a service that she couldn't have done before we really had that technology in place. So that's important. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say, but the advantages to the technology, that's absolutely part of it. So how do you make that in all walks of faith? How do you make that a positive without it being an easy excuse to not show up for all those community things that are great? I'm sure you guys have these kind of good discussions all the time.
I think Tom knows all the answers on these questions.
Tom, go ahead. Tom, let's solve this right now.
Yeah, I've been waiting anxiously to just start spewing off all the answers. I tell you what, that is, I'm tongue twisted on that one, to be honest with you.
Well, the reason I bring it up, obviously, is because the technology is not going away, and this technology is not going away, and the positives that come from it are numerous. There is a built-in negative if it's an excuse not to get up, say on a Sunday morning, and to go to church and to celebrate your faith with others in person. So I certainly don't have the answer, but I would assume Christian leaders get together all the time and go, okay, it's good, but is it good for us?
I just want to go back and revisit something that I said the last time we were together, and I said,
no, there's no corrections. I'm sorry, we don't take corrections.
No. More in response to this is that, we put in live stream technology back in 2015 at Old St. Patrick's Church when I was the pastor. And we did that for the purpose of staying in contact with people if they moved away from Old St. Pat's, if they moved away from Chicago, and also as a way of allowing people that if somehow, some way they experienced our worship at 5:00 Mass on a Sunday, that maybe it might be a little taste and they might actually find it appealing. And so therefore they might come. Again, as I said, I learned about live stream and its benefits from my friends out at St. Monica's Church out in Santa Monica, California. And so I just want to go back to say that, and it served its purpose. We had a good 600-700 people in church at 5:00 on a Sunday. And when we looked at the numbers, we had another 400 to 500 people that were joining us. By I'd say Wednesday, Thursday of the following week, we might have been up to maybe 800 to 1,000 people that viewed it. So they joined us, but at a later time, the recording of it, if you will. I think that's all great. I think it's a balance. I think it's both and. I don't think that we just scrap the technology because, first of all, we're not going to scrap the technology.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's got a benefit, but I think there is something about showing up. And like I said, let's go to the perfect example of schools. People have said, I'm in a school, and people have said that kids are still experiencing some of the negative effects of having to go to school on these darn things on a computer day after day after day for some kids over a year or longer. And so I think it's both and like we said, hey, this is fantastic. If the snow is falling and there's 24 inches of snow in Chicago, hey, we can still have school, kids. There's no more snow days,
Yeah.
Kids don't like it, but we loved it as kids, but now you can do this. But what would it be like if all of our life was just doing this, talking into a screen? I just don't think and I think the same is true with community and worship. You can't form a community just by doing it virtually. I think we got to body up. Well,
and I think you both come back to where we sort of landed last time. It comes down to your family unit and how you act as a family, what you believe as a family, and the messages you pass on as your kids are growing up. And eventually the kids are going to find their own way and they're going to choose their path to believe. Tradition's obviously a big part of it, but coming off ancient traditions like Easter and Passover in a world where we communicate so differently, is it hard to tell those old stories the same way, or is that part of the advantage that this is one of those things where the old way is the way these stories should be told? You know, you're not going to get on TikTok to TikTok Easter or Passover, at least not fully. Do you need to find new ways to make it more relevant? Does that make church more attractive to kids, or is that overthinking it?
I, you know, I think you do need the old ways. I think the technology is better as a doorway. You know, you find that if people who tune in online also end up coming to the church or the synagogue, that's ideal. That you've given another pathway for people to connect, but it can't replace it. And I do think, I mean, we all know we're social animals. We even if we're shy, it doesn't mean you're outgoing or less outgoing. We operate well when we're around others. There's so much language communication that's done with body, with gestures, with just, the exchange of energy. And that's missing, the enthusiasm. You can be enthusiastic online, but it translates much better in person. So I do think there are certain stories, feelings, experiences that are irreplaceable. That you just, there are certain things that are much more efficient online. You can have meetings and certain things that, are just almost an exchange of information. That's great. Do that online. But telling the ancient story, enacting the ancient rituals, it's irreplaceable.
When it comes to younger people who believe and have believed readily and maybe aren't going anymore, politics turning them off? I mean, certainly amongst evangelicals, Tom, that's been a big story of coverage for the last 7 or 8 years, that people are turned off because, like separation of church and state, part of the Constitution. But do you need to work to keep politics out of church and out of temple? I mean, does that fall under part of your job duties these days more than ever?
I think so. I mean, I think politics have not leaked over. I think they have been a deluge. I think they've absolutely, totally invaded church life. And I think sometimes church politics is maybe even worse than more of the secular politics. Absolutely. I think, and I'm gonna let Evan can say for himself too, but I just think that, oh my gosh, I mean, the ultra right conservative, and then those for whom they don't want to have anything to do with church. I just think the dichotomy is so huge. I think it's doing a lot of damage in terms of the church. The other thing I guess I would say is just, you go back to, the traditions. Yeah, we have to end on the traditions, but I would also say that when it comes to younger people, we're still, we talked about this the other day when we were out together, and it's like, we're still doing the old playbook. And I keep using that example, but we are. And as long as we're going to keep using the old playbook, I think young people are not going to respond. We don't have a deep bench. We don't have great preachers. A lot of our places with music and hospitality is mediocre at best. And, they might come on they might come on Easter. As Evan said, they might come for Passover, but I agree. I think there's probably more younger people who have even gotten to the point where they're not even doing Easter or Christmas anymore, just like they may not even be doing Passover anymore. And that to me is alarming.
Yeah.
And I should be an alarm to our leaders in the church.
Is it alarming in Rome? Is it alarming at the Vatican? Or, I mean, this is where it gets very serious. This is part of the discussion, because if you go to the Home Office, I guess I would ask it as a larger question. Amongst the network of priests you readily stay in contact with, are they aware or accepting of the fact that there's a problem at the head of the Catholic Church in particular?
I think among my peers and colleagues, I think, yes, I think there's a great awareness of people who aren't going, the mediocrity. I think there is a growing concern, but I think when it comes to the leadership, and I'm not quite sure about, I think Pope Francis is in touch, and I think he's in tune with the developed nations. And that's where the church, I think, is hurting the most. But again, as we've said before, this conversation is totally crazy talk. If we were going to go to places like Nigeria or places in Asia or Latin America where the church still has solid numbers and people who are attending services. So I think this is more of an issue for the United States, places in Europe, more developed nations, where church is definitely in the backseat.
Anything you want to add to that, Evan?
No, I mean, yeah, I think the details are different, but the overarching framework is similar in Judaism, in that there's definitely political tension right now. It's really centered on Israel, and sort of the tension between the ultra Orthodox and secular Israelis is really spilled out into the open, and also is affecting the stability of Israel's political system. So, that tension is not as manifest in the United States. I mean, there is some. Certainly the United States, even the, more Orthodox here are kind of concerned about what's happening in Israel. But it's a different manifestation, but it's certainly the politics and of the differences amongst communities makes addressing the larger challenges much harder.
If younger people feel like they aren't being listened to, so therefore, why do they need to go to church? Even if they are of faith and they think they can find it elsewhere, how do you combine that? How do you combine the fact that, yes, we're going to listen to you, but in turn, we also need you to respect the traditions of what's been built here? I mean, I think that's a fair exchange. Is that message is it missing on some level?
Well, again, I hate to sound political here, but some of it might have to do with sort of the breakdown of the family in some ways, because a family is where you sort of learn these things. You are both reinforced in certain lessons, but also add your voice to it. And the fact that, a lot of people don't grow up in intact families makes conveying that harder. So it's either all or nothing. The kind of stable passage of tradition from one generation to the next can be disrupted easily. So I don't blame, I don't blame young people who are turned off. I always just see that more as a challenge, because I think from where they're coming from, sometimes as Tom puts it, many churches and synagogues are using an old playbook. It doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing I would add to that is that, when we talk about young people as if perhaps maybe like they're the core problem, and they're really not. And when you an expression that Evan just used about, younger people being turned off, that's presuming that they were ever turned on. And to use the expression, obviously the most appropriate way. But I mean, were they ever even turned on? Was there ever even a pilot light that was lit in terms of, faith? So, I mean, when we talk about young people, that's not just limited to people in their like teens and 20s. I think we need to be, talking about, young parents and young families and people in their 30s and 40s and maybe even my age 50s that, where they've drifted. I mean, that's one thing that the church has, they've identified. It's, the drifters, people who have just drifted away because, I mean, I know plenty of people my own age. I mean, here I'm a priest of 30 years and I know of kids, guys and girls that I went to high school and college with that have drifted away because, we're not speaking to them anymore. So if we're not speaking to them, then what have they been able to do for their own kids? So who knows?
That's the old playbook thing that we were speaking of, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's the old playbook, but I think it's also not just an old playbook, but I would say the deterioration of whatever playbook we have been using. I just think we've got communities that, or leaders that just, gosh, talk about old playbook, but I mean, they don't even run the old plays. I mean, you know what I mean? It's just like when I hear story after story after story, and I feel bad, but it's like they talk about experiences that are lifeless, and it's just ho hum, and it's like, again, I keep using the word mediocre, but it is, and I think as a result of that, that's not inspiring. In our tradition, good old Jesus was an inspirational figure. He could inspire people. That's what we're supposed to be doing, and I don't think that that's happening a lot.
I think that's an interesting word, because we hear the word inspire all the time. I think faith needs to be inspirational and aspirational. And aspirational to me creates a vision of, I want to be better. I want to be better. I want to take my life to a higher place. And an important part of that is faith. And whether you're a Jew, a Christian, if you love Islam, whatever your faith may be, the closer you can get to it, I believe you benefit from it. But in the few minutes we have here, because we can't do justice to it as usual, even here when we don't have to go to traffic and weather, we run out of time. But maybe a traffic report's appropriate, but we're not going to do it. I do want to mention one thing because it's important. And Rabbi, you and I should probably have a longer discussion about this. But one of the many books you've done is called First the Jews, Combating the World's Longest Running Hate Campaign, correct?
Yes, on anti-Semitism, and obviously continues to be a tremendous issue.
It's a giant story, so I look forward to having a longer discussion. But this idea that there will always be those who treat people differently because they don't believe as you believe is a sad but true thing that can be helped by going to church, by going to temple, and by celebrating and meeting people you don't know and finding out that strangers are actually much closer than you truly understand. And so I hope you'll get that book. But if there's one similarity between all of us, especially this time of year, it's a lot of people are getting married. And you two have done many weddings together. So let me end it on a positive here, at least end this part on a positive. I met somebody the other day who said, he was a young man in his 20s. And he said, I'm the absolute cliche of being a good Jewish boy. And he's 24 years old, and he's fallen in love with a young lady who happens to be a Catholic girl. And his family is on board, but he's very afraid about his grandmother. He loves his grandmother dearly, and he doesn't quite know how to introduce her to grandma and how to proceed, because he and his girlfriend believe they're headed down that road where they'll be husband and wife soon. So do you have any messages for somebody that is headed that way, for younger people or even older folks, I suppose, because you guys have done a million of these types of weddings and things? What do you say to the family?
That's such a huge issue. I would try to talk to the grandma in a way that is respectful of her point of view. You're not going to change her mind. If she believes that, that interfaith marriage is not good, I wouldn't try to engage in debate over that. I would just try to say, this is the woman I love and makes me happy, and we're going to, do the best we can to carry on, Jewish tradition in our family. And it doesn't mean that I'm, for many years, probably when the grandmother grew up, at that time, if you were Jewish and you married somebody not Jewish, it was like you were leaving the Jewish people. It was like an exit ticket. Mm-hmm. But that's not how it is today. As Tom and I, can talk about, people who are of two different faiths, they honor and live both faiths quite often. That wasn't the case probably when grandma grew up. So I think honoring that history and trying to explain that you're not rejecting your own religion, it's a core part of who you are. It might not work. I am not saying this is some of these issues are really intractable, but I would try to just be as respectful and focus on the loving relationship as much as possible.
From the Catholic perspective, certainly there's an awful lot of Catholic folks who would go, what do you mean you're not marrying inside the faith? Tom, what do you do when you're presented with a young couple who are going through this?
I too, along with Evan, and one thing I would just add to what he beautifully said already, is really our witness. And it's, if Evan and I are together, I think one of the things that really, I think works for us, because we have this chemistry. I don't think it's just chemistry of personality, but I think it's also a chemistry and a shared type of belief and theology that this is okay. This is more than okay. This is beautiful. And God doesn't see the distinctions between Jew or Catholic, but God is embracing and blessing you as a couple. And I think when he and I, or if I'm with Ari, whatever, I think when we're together, I think the most important thing is our witness and our testimony. And I tell you, there have been plenty of times when I have been doing the baby naming baptism. So when the couples have gone on, they've gotten married, and now they're having kids. And now we're doing this, hybrid service where they receive their Hebrew name, and then we also, baptize them. Again, critics can stand back and say, oh, that's craziness, you're adding confusion. I think, again, the half full people, the more optimistic people, the more, I would think, faith-filled people are going to say, wow, this is really beautiful, is that they're honoring both of their traditions. And so I think it's really important that the leaders, we as leaders of prayer and as faith leaders, really show our reverence and our respect. And I think that goes a long, long way. Let me tell you, I've been in plenty of those baby naming baptism situations where you can clearly see the grandparents are kind of, adjusting themselves in their seats a little bit, like, what are we doing here? And is this really, we should be protecting our own turf type of thing. And again, I'm not patting ourselves on the back too hard here, but I'm just saying, I think we're able to kind of smooth things over a little bit to say, this is okay. One of the things I say to couples, you ask me, one of the things I always say to couples is, hey, and I'm usually in some building that has multiple doorways, and they say, hey, there's a lot of different ways into the mystery of God. And there's no wrong way into the mystery of God. And you, Steve Cochran, many times on your own morning show have said many, many times, I don't care who your God is or what you call your God, but believe in something, and turn to something. So, kudos to you for the inspiration that you also give to us.
That's nice. No, it's nice of you to say that. I guess I'd leave it in saying that if you're lucky enough in this life to find somebody to love who loves you back, I would certainly hope you have a house of faith and worship and a family that is as thrilled about it as you are.
You're here.
So,
Oh, yeah.
Rabbi Evan Moffic, we'll pick this up again, and Father Tom Hurley, as you call yourself now. Yeah. Father Tom Hurley, it's always a pleasure. You both are important folks to have this discussion with. I really appreciate it. I think we do help and hopefully inspire people in moving forward on their own journey. So thank you for the time.
Thanks for having us. Let's do it again.
Yeah. Thank you. This was wonderful as always.
Before we go, a big thank you to Ross Cochran, who is the executive producer of Live from My Office, getting it done to make sure you hear this, and thank you for listening to it. CochranShow.com is where all of Live from My Office episodes live. But outside of that, whether it's Apple or whether it's Spotify or whatever platform you're listening on, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review so you get every episode. It really does help us. And also, I'd encourage you to drop me an email about a potential Kid of the Week. That's another piece of the Steve Cochran radio show on WLS. Listen on the radio, 890 WLS, on your smart devices, wherever radio is streamed, or just come in the studio, sit with me, and you can hear it live. All right, thank you for listening to that, and thank you for listening to this. Kid of the Week is where we ask you to tell us about good news about kids, and man, do we need it now. So just any good news about any kid you know or hear about that you think I ought to know about, drop me an email at thecochranshow@gmail.com. That's thecochranshow@gmail.com, and tell me about a good kid doing good things. In the meantime, I thank you for listening, and I thank Father Tom Hurley and Rabbi Evan Moffic. We'll continue that conversation. Hope you enjoyed part 2. If you haven't caught up on part 1, it's right there at CochranShow.com as well for your consumption. And we'll see you next time on Live from My Office.
Thank you for listening to Live from My Office, a service of Monkey Run Productions. All rights reserved. The podcast is hosted by Steve Cochran, and it's mixed, edited, and produced by me, Ross Cochran. Steve is available for corporate speaking gigs. He would love to MC your event, and occasionally, he's funny. Thank you for listening. Head to cochranshow.com for more.